I could feel their stares burning into my back as I crossed the dining hall, my tray clutched tight against my chest like a shield. The weight of their judgment was heavier than the ancient wooden beams that stretched across the ceiling of the pack house. Everyone knew what I was, what I wasn't. Too quiet, too different, too rare. The scent of roasted meat and hearty stew filled the air, but beneath it lurked the unmistakable aroma of distrust. I inhaled softly, keeping my breath shallow to avoid drawing attention. My light hair fell forward, creating a curtain between me and their scrutiny as I slipped into the furthest corner of the room, where the shadows offered some semblance of safety. "Rare Omega," someone whispered, the words slithering across the room like a venomous snake. "Useless," another added, not bothering to lower their voice. I focused on the wooden table before me, tracing the grain with my fingertip. The patterns reminded me of the rivers my grandmother used to sketch in her journals. The same journals she'd pressed into my hands before she died, whispering that being rare wasn't a curse but a gift not yet understood. The small leather-bound book remained hidden beneath my mattress, its pages filled with wisdom I clung to when nights grew unbearable. "You shouldn't sit alone, little bird," came a soft voice, startling me from my thoughts. Mira, with her kind eyes and warm smile, slid onto the bench across from me. She was the only one who ever approached me willingly, the only one who didn't seem to mind that I was different, an Omega too weak to register on most werewolves' senses, too quiet to fulfill the traditional Omega role of peacekeeper and nurturer. "The delegation from the Northern Kingdom arrives tonight," she said, her voice pitched low. "Everyone's on edge." I nodded, forcing a spoonful of stew into my mouth, though my appetite had vanished. The Northern Kingdom, the most powerful werewolf territory on the continent, ruled by an alpha king whose name was whispered with equal parts fear and reverence. This visit could change everything for our struggling southern pack, which had been ravaged by disease and territorial disputes. "Rylan wants all Omegas to help prepare the welcome feast," Mira continued, referring to our pack's beta, who had taken temporary leadership after our alpha had fallen ill. "But he specifically said you should stay out of sight." My spoon clattered against the bowl. Despite knowing I should be accustomed to such treatment, the words still stung. "Because I'm defective," I whispered. Not a question, but a statement of the reality I'd lived with since my first shift revealed my nature. "Because you're different," Mira corrected, reaching across to squeeze my hand. "And difference frightens people who don't understand it." I looked around the dining hall at my packmates, wolves who had known me my entire life yet treated me like a stranger. Some avoided my gaze entirely, while others watched with thinly veiled contempt. In their eyes, I was broken, an Omega who couldn't properly soothe emotions or ease tensions, who couldn't bear strong pups or contribute to the pack's harmony. A rare Omega, whose scent was so faint it was nearly imperceptible, whose presence was so easily overlooked that sometimes I wondered if I was slowly disappearing altogether. "My grandmother used to say that the quietest rivers carve the deepest canyons," I said, fingering the delicate silver chain around my neck, the only possession I had of hers besides the journal. A small pendant hung from it, engraved with flowing water patterns that matched her drawings. "That strength isn't always obvious at first glance." Mira smiled, but I could see the pity behind it. "Your grandmother was wise, but wisdom doesn't always protect us from reality." A sudden hush fell over the dining hall. Rylan had entered, his imposing figure commanding immediate attention. His cold eyes swept the room before landing on me, narrowing with disapproval. "Preparations for the northern delegation begin immediately," he announced, his voice echoing off the stone walls. "Every member of this pack has a role to play in ensuring we make the right impression." His gaze lingered meaningfully on me. "Almost every member." Laughter rippled through the room, and I shrank further into my seat, wishing I could dissolve into the shadows completely. "The Northern Alpha seeks alliances," Rylan continued, "and alliances require strength. We will show him that despite our recent hardships, the Southern Pack remains worthy of his consideration." As conversations erupted around us, Mira leaned closer. "Stay in your quarters tonight," she whispered. "It's safer that way." I nodded, knowing she was right. But as I rose to leave, something strange happened. The pendant at my throat grew inexplicably warm, pulsing against my skin like a second heartbeat. I clutched it, confused, as a sudden wave of dizziness washed over me. "Are you all right?" Mira asked, concern etching her features. I'm fine," I managed, steadying myself against the table. "Just tired." But as I made my way out of the dining hall, the sensation only intensified. A pulling, a yearning, as though some invisible thread was tugging me toward the northern forests, toward something, or someone I couldn't yet name. The moon hung heavy in the night sky, casting silver light across my small room. Sleep evaded me as sounds of preparation echoed through the pack house. Excited voices, hurried footsteps, doors slamming. The northern delegation would arrive any moment. And despite Mira's warning, despite knowing I wasn't wanted, I found myself drawn to my window. My room overlooked the main courtyard, giving me a perfect view of the proceedings below. Torches had been lit, creating a path from the gates to the main entrance of the pack house. Pack members lined the way, dressed in their finest clothes, an impressive display of strength and unity. I pressed my palm against the cool glass, watching as Rylan took his position at the front, chin lifted with pride, though I knew he was merely acting as proxy for our ailing alpha. Even from this distance, I could sense his anxiety, a bitter undercurrent to his usually confident demeanor. The pendant grew warmer against my skin, and I wrapped my fingers around it, drawing comfort from its familiar shape. "What are you trying to tell me?" I whispered, half expecting an answer from the relic of my grandmother's wisdom. A horn sounded in the distance, a deep, resonant call that sent shivers down my spine. They were coming. I should have retreated from the window, should have hidden away as instructed. Instead, I pressed closer, breath fogging the glass as the gate swung open and the first riders appeared. They entered in formation, their movements precise and coordinated, exuding power with every step. Their horses were massive beasts, midnight black against the torchlit courtyard, adorned with silver trappings that gleamed in the moonlight. And then he appeared. Even without prior knowledge, I would have known instantly that he was their alpha. He rode at the center, a commanding presence that drew all eyes. Tall and broad-shouldered, with features carved from stone, high cheekbones, a strong jaw, eyes that even from my distant perch seemed to pierce through the night. His hair was dark as a raven's wing, pulled back to reveal a face marked not by cruelty, as I had imagined, but by something more complex, a weariness, perhaps, or a loneliness that resonated with something deep inside me. The pendant burned hot against my skin, and I gasped, stumbling back from the window as an inexplicable wave of emotion crashed over me. Fear and longing intertwined so deeply I couldn't separate one from the other. My heart raced, blood rushing in my ears as though my body recognized something my mind couldn't yet comprehend. I sank to the floor, back pressed against the wall, fighting to catch my breath. What was happening to me? Why did the sight of this stranger affect me so profoundly? The sound of my door flying open startled me from my thoughts. Mira stood in the doorway, eyes wide with panic. "You need to hide," she whispered urgently, rushing to my side. "Now." "What? Why?" I asked, confused by the fear in her voice. "The Northern Alpha." She paused, glancing nervously over her shoulder. He sensed something when he arrived. Something that made him stop in his tracks. Rylan is furious, thinks one of the Omegas did something to offend him. "I don't understand," I said, rising shakily to my feet. "What did he sense?" Mira shook her head. "I don't know. But he's demanding to meet every member of the pack. Every wolf, regardless of rank." Her eyes met mine, fear evident in their depths, including those who were meant to remain hidden. My blood ran cold. Me? But why would he? A commotion in the hallway cut me off, heavy footsteps approaching rapidly. Mira's face paled. "It's too late," she whispered. "They're coming." The door burst open once more, revealing Rylan's imposing figure. His face was contorted with barely contained rage, his eyes finding me immediately. "You!" he snarled, crossing the room in 3 long strides and grabbing my arm with bruising force. "What have you done?" "Nothing," I gasped, wincing at his grip. "I've been here all night, just as I was told." "Then why is the Northern Alpha demanding to see every wolf in the pack? Why did he stop mid-greeting looking like he'd been struck?" Rylan's fingers dug deeper into my flesh. "What spell have you cast, defective one?" "I've cast no spell," I protested, fear giving way to a flash of indignation. "I have no power to cast anything. Rylan, please," Mira interjected, placing a hesitant hand on his arm. "She's telling the truth. She's been here the whole time." He shoved her away, his focus never leaving my face. "The Alpha King waits for no one. Every member of this pack will present themselves, as ordered." A cruel smile twisted his lips. "Even our little aberration. Perhaps seeing your weakness will remind him why alliances matter, to protect even the most pathetic among us." He dragged me toward the door, and though I stumbled, trying to dig my heels in, his strength far exceeded mine. Panic clawed at my throat as he pulled me down the corridor, past curious and condemning eyes, down the grand staircase toward the main hall where the delegation waited. "Please," I begged, my voice barely audible. "Don't do this." But Rylan's grip only tightened as he leaned close, his breath hot against my ear. "Remember your place," he hissed. "Head down, eyes lowered, speak only if spoken to, and pray to the moon goddess that your strangeness doesn't cost us this alliance." We reached the massive oak doors that led to the great hall, and I could hear voices on the other side, deep, commanding tones that made my pendant pulse in response. Rylan paused, straightening his clothes before shooting me one last warning glance. "One mistake," he murmured, "and you'll wish you'd never been born into this pack." The door swung open, and Rylan's demeanor changed instantly, a deferential smile replacing his scowl as he pushed me forward into a room filled with more wolves than I had ever faced at once. The northern delegation stood on one side, their presence commanding and intimidating in their fine leather and furs. Our pack members lined the opposite wall, eyes downcast, the hierarchy of our society clearly displayed in their positioning, and at the center of it all stood the Alpha King. Up close, he was even more imposing than he had appeared from my window. Tall and powerfully built, he emanated an authority that seemed to press against my skin, making it difficult to breathe. His face remained impassive, unreadable, but his eyes, a startling shade of silver gray that reminded me of storm clouds, tracked my movement from the moment I entered. The pendant at my throat burned like a brand, and something inside me trembled in recognition. Rylan's hand at my back forced me into a deep bow. "My Alpha," he addressed the Northern King with exaggerated respect. "The last member of our pack, as requested." A heavy silence fell over the room. I kept my gaze fixed on the stone floor, heart hammering against my ribs, aware of the curious and hostile stares from all sides. "Look at me," came a voice that seemed to resonate through my very bones, deep, commanding, leaving no room for refusal. Slowly, I raised my head, meeting the Alpha King's gaze directly for the first time. The world around us seemed to falter, sounds fading into a distant hum as our eyes locked. His expression changed, shock, disbelief, and something else I couldn't name flashing across his features before his control reasserted itself. But I had seen it. That moment of recognition, of vulnerability that mirrored my own confused response. "What is your name?" he asked, his voice softer now but no less powerful. Before I could answer, Rylan stepped forward. "She is no one of importance, Alpha King. A rare Omega, defective in her abilities. I did not ask you." The Alpha King cut him off, his tone deadly quiet. "I asked her." The room fell silent once more, tension crackling in the air like lightning before a storm. I swallowed hard, finding my voice despite the fear constricting my throat. "Elena," I said, my name falling from my lips like a confession. "My name is Elena." The Alpha King's eyes narrowed slightly, as if testing the sound of my name in his mind. For a heartbeat, the great hall remained suspended in silence, the air between us charged with unspoken recognition. "Elena," he repeated, and the way my name rolled off his tongue sent a shiver racing down my spine. "Come forward." Murmurs rippled through the room. From the corner of my eye, I saw Rylan stiffen, his face contorting with barely contained rage and confusion. No one had expected the Alpha King to address me directly, least of all to summon me closer. My legs trembled as I took one hesitant step, then another. The pendant against my chest pulsed with increasing urgency, as if pulling me toward him. Every instinct screamed at me to lower my gaze, to shrink away from his scrutiny, yet I found myself unable to look away from those storm-gray eyes. "My king!" One of the northern warriors stepped forward, his hand resting casually on the hilt of a blade at his hip. "Is something amiss?" The Alpha King held up a hand, silencing his guard without taking his eyes off me. As I drew closer, I noticed details I hadn't been able to discern from a distance. The slight shadow of exhaustion beneath his eyes, the tension in his jaw, the way his nostrils flared subtly as if he were trying to catch a scent that eluded him. When I stood before him, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his towering frame, he circled me slowly. I fought the urge to flinch as he leaned in, inhaling deeply near my hair. The pendant burned hotter, and I resisted the impulse to clutch it through my simple dress. "They call you defective," he said, his voice pitched low enough that only I could hear. "A rare Omega. Explain what this means." I swallowed hard, acutely aware of every eye in the room watching us. My scent is too faint for most wolves to detect," I admitted, the shame of this fact burning in my cheeks. I do not soothe emotions or calm tensions as Omegas should. My presence goes unnoticed rather than bringing comfort." He completed his circle, coming to stand before me again, his expression unreadable. "And this makes you defective in their eyes?" Something in his tone, a hint of incredulity, perhaps even anger, gave me courage. In a world where worth is measured by utility to the pack, yes. A muscle ticked in his jaw. "Look at me," he commanded again, though I hadn't lowered my gaze this time. I lifted my chin slightly, meeting his stare directly. For a fleeting moment, something flashed in those storm-gray depths. Recognition, wonder, a question without words. "You're Alpha," he said, addressing Rylan, though his eyes never left mine. I wished to speak with him. Rylan cleared his throat nervously. "As I mentioned upon your arrival, Alpha King Nathaniel, our leader has been ill these past months. I serve as his proxy in all matters." "Then take me to him," the Alpha King, Nathaniel, commanded, finally breaking our shared gaze to fix Rylan with a look that brooked no argument. "Now." "Of course." Rylan bowed deeply, shooting me a venomous glance. "But perhaps first we should continue with the welcoming feast. Your journey was long and—" "Now," Nathaniel repeated, his voice carrying the unmistakable weight of an Alpha command. The room fell silent once more, tension thick enough to choke on. Rylan's face flushed dark with humiliation as he bowed again. "As you wish. This way, please." As Nathaniel moved to follow, he paused beside me. "You," he said quietly, "will accompany us." Gasps echoed through the hall. Rare Omegas were kept away from important matters, considered not just useless, but potentially disruptive. My presence at a meeting between Alphas was unprecedented. "My king," Rylan protested. "Surely the girl would only be a distraction. Her presence serves no—" "Are you questioning my orders?" Nathaniel's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. Rylan paled. "No, Alpha King. Of course not." "Good." Nathaniel gestured for me to walk ahead of him. "Lead the way to your Alpha, Beta Rylan. The girl comes with us." I felt the hatred emanating from Rylan as I moved past him, following his stiff back as he led us from the great hall. Behind me walked Nathaniel, his presence a tangible force that seemed to envelop me like a cloak. Two of his warriors followed, their footsteps nearly silent despite their size. We climbed the eastern staircase toward the private quarters where our ailing Alpha had been confined these past months. With each step, my confusion grew. Why had the northern Alpha singled me out? Why did my pendant react so strongly to his presence? And why did I feel this inexplicable pull toward a man who should, by all rights, terrify me? Rylan paused outside an ornately carved door at the end of the corridor. "Our Alpha is very weak," he said, his tone suggesting this was a rehearsed warning. "He tires easily and should not be overtaxed." Nathaniel merely nodded, his expression revealing nothing of his thoughts. With visible reluctance, Rylan knocked softly before pushing the door open. The scent of sickness immediately assaulted us. Stale air tinged with medicinal herbs and the underlying smell of decay. The room was dimly lit, heavy curtains drawn against the moonlight, a single oil lamp casting long shadows across the walls. Our Alpha, once a robust and powerful wolf, lay propped against pillows in a massive bed that now seemed to swallow his diminished form. His face was gaunt, skin stretched tight over prominent bones, eyes sunken into dark hollows. But those eyes, once amber and fierce, brightened with interest as we entered. "The Northern Alpha honors us," he said, his voice a raspy whisper of its former strength. "Welcome to our territory, Alpha King Nathaniel." Nathaniel stepped forward, offering a respectful nod to the ailing wolf. "Alpha Darius, your reputation precedes you." A ghost of a smile touched Darius's lips. "As does yours." His gaze shifted, landing on me with surprise. "Elena, why are you here, child?" Before I could respond, Nathaniel spoke. I requested her presence. Something flickered in Darius's expression. Curiosity, perhaps, or concern. "I see." His eyes moved between us, assessing. "Then there must be a reason." Rylan stepped forward. "Alpha, perhaps you should rest. We can continue these discussions tomorrow when—" "Silence," Darius commanded, and despite his weakened state, the alpha power in his voice was unmistakable. "Leave us, Rylan." "But Alpha—" "Leave us," Darius repeated. "Take the Northern Guards with you. What passes between Alphas requires privacy." Rylan's face darkened with fury, but he bowed stiffly. "As you command." He gestured to Nathaniel's warriors, who looked to their Alpha for confirmation. Nathaniel nodded once, and his men followed Rylan from the room, closing the door behind them. As soon as they were gone, Darius's posture softened, exhaustion claiming him once more. "Now," he said, looking between Nathaniel and me with open curiosity. "Perhaps one of you will tell me what this is truly about." Nathaniel moved further into the room, his powerful presence somehow gentler now. "Your illness," he said. "It's been many months with no improvement?" Darius sighed heavily. "A slow poison, the healers say. One that resists all remedies." His gaze sharpened suddenly. "But you didn't come here to discuss my health, Alpha King. You seek alliances along the border territories." "That was my intent," Nathaniel agreed, his tone measured. "Until I arrived incensed." He paused, glancing at me. My pendant pulsed warmly against my skin, and I resisted the urge to touch it. "You sensed what exactly?" Darius prompted, his attention fully engaged despite his obvious fatigue. Nathaniel's expression remained carefully neutral. "Something unexpected." He turned to me. "Tell me about your family, Elena." The question caught me off guard. "My family? I have none left, Alpha King. My parents died when I was young. My grandmother raised me until she passed 5 winters ago." "Your grandmother," he pressed. "What was her name?" "Alara," I answered, confused by his interest. "Alara of the Silver Waters." Both Alphas went utterly still. Darius's eyes widened, while Nathaniel's narrowed to intense focus. "Silver Waters," Nathaniel repeated. "A northern clan that disappeared a generation ago." Darius nodded slowly. "I remember now. Alara came to us seeking sanctuary, with a small child in tow." His gaze settled on me with new understanding. "You were that child." My heart pounded against my grandmother
ribs.
never spoke of our origins. She only said we were safer here, in the south. "And the pendant?" Nathaniel asked, his eyes dropping to where it lay hidden beneath my dress. Instinctively, I reached for it, drawing it out into the light. The silver gleamed in the lamplight, the flowing water patterns seeming to move with a life of their own. It was hers. She gave it to me before she died. Nathaniel stepped closer, his presence overwhelming my senses. "May I?" After a moment's hesitation, I nodded. He reached out, his fingers brushing mine as he examined the pendant without removing it from around my neck. The brief contact sent a jolt through me, like lightning beneath my skin. From his sharp intake of breath, I knew he had felt it too. "The royal crest of the Silver Waters clan," he said quietly. "A clan with ancient bloodlines and unique gifts." Darius watched us with growing comprehension. So the rumors were true. The Silver Waters Omegas could mask their presence, becoming virtually undetectable when they wished. "Not just mask," Nathaniel corrected, his gaze locked with mine. "They could control the emotional currents around them with unprecedented precision. Their rarity wasn't a defect. It was an evolutionary advantage. They appeared weak to those who couldn't sense their true nature, but to compatible alphas. He trailed off, something intense and unspoken passing between us. To compatible alphas, Darius finished for him. They were the most precious of mates, capable of balancing even the most dominant wolf's nature. The word mates hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. My mind raced to process what they were saying. All my life I'd been treated as defective, broken, but what if my grandmother had known the truth? What if the journal hidden beneath my mattress contained answers she hadn't lived long enough to share? "Is that why you requested my presence?" I asked Nathaniel, finding courage I didn't know I possessed. "Because you sensed something in me that others cannot?" His expression softened almost imperceptibly. "I sensed nothing at first," he admitted. "It was the absence that caught my attention. A void where a presence should be, noticeable only because I was specifically watching for signs of threat or deception." "A void," I repeated, the familiar shame creeping back into my voice. "No," he said firmly. "A still pool that reflects nothing until you know to look beneath its surface." His fingers brushed the pendant once more. "This reacted to my presence, did it not?" I nodded, unable to lie. "It grew warm when you arrived. It pulled me toward you." Darius made a soft sound of understanding. The Silver Waters artifacts were said to recognize true bonds, connections forged by the moon goddess herself. "True bonds," I echoed, the implication sending a tremor through me. Nathaniel's gaze intensified, searching my face as if memorizing every detail. "For 3 years, I've traveled to every pack in the realm, seeking alliances. Yes, but also," he hesitated, vulnerability flickering briefly across his features. "Also searching for something I wasn't certain existed. A mate," Darius supplied, watching us with knowing eyes. "An alpha king needs his balance." The door burst open before Nathaniel could respond, breaking the intimate moment. Rylan stormed in, followed by several members of our pack council, their faces twisted with outrage. "What treachery is this?" Rylan demanded, glaring at me with naked hatred. "Conspiring with our alpha behind closed doors? Watch your tone," Nathaniel warned, his voice deadly quiet. "You forget yourself, Beta." Rylan's attention snapped to Nathaniel, fury momentarily overcome by wariness. "Forgive me, Alpha King, but when guards are dismissed, and secret conversations occur involving a defective Omega, one must question the intent." "The intent," Darius said from his bed, his voice stronger than before, "was privacy for matters that do not concern you, Rylan." "Everything concerning this pack concerns me," Rylan insisted, stepping farther into the room, "especially when our future hangs in the balance." I noticed with growing unease how Rylan positioned himself between Darius and the rest of us, how his hand rested casually near a dagger at his belt. Something about his manner had shifted, the deference replaced by barely concealed aggression. Nathaniel must have sensed it too, for he moved subtly, placing himself between me and Rylan. "Your concern for your pack is commendable," he said, his tone neutral, though his posture was anything but. "However, the alliance I seek may take a form you haven't anticipated." Rylan's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "What form?" "One sanctioned by ancient law and tradition," Nathaniel replied, his gaze flicking briefly to me. "A bond between packs through compatible pairs." Understanding dawned on Rylan's face, followed quickly by disgust. "You can't possibly mean—" He broke off, staring at me with revulsion. "Her? The defective one? This is some kind of jest." "I do not jest about matters of succession and alliance," Nathaniel said coldly. "Elena possesses qualities your pack has failed to recognize or value. Qualities that make her uniquely suited to the role of—" "This is absurd," Rylan exploded, his control finally snapping. "She is nothing. A weak, useless Omega who contributes nothing to this pack. And you would elevate her to what? Northern Queen?" He laughed bitterly. "Your judgment is clearly impaired, Alpha King." The temperature in the room seemed to drop as Nathaniel's expression hardened to granite. Choose your next words with extreme care, Beta. They may be your last. The threat hung in the air, unmistakable in its intent. I glanced at Darius, expecting him to intervene, but our alpha was watching the confrontation with an odd expression. Part concern, part calculation. Ryland's gaze darted between us, assessing his position. Slowly, deliberately, he inclined his head in a mockery of submission. Of course. Forgive my passionate defense of our pack's interests. His voice dripped with insincerity. If you truly believe this, rare Omega is worthy of your attention, who am I to question the Alpha King's wisdom? Nathaniel's expression remained dangerously impassive. Indeed. However, Ryland continued, edging toward the door. Such momentous decisions should be properly celebrated. The welcoming feast awaits, and our pack members are eager to honor our distinguished guests. His eyes flickered to me, hatred barely concealed. All matters of alliance can be discussed after proper refreshment and rest. Darius finally spoke, his voice carrying surprising authority despite his weakness. The Alpha King and I have more to discuss. You will oversee the feast preparations, Ryland. We will join when we are ready. For a moment, Ryland looked as though he might object. Then, with visible effort, he composed himself and bowed. As you wish, Alpha. As he straightened, his gaze locked with mine, a silent promise of retribution that sent a chill down my spine. When the door closed behind him and the council members, silence settled over the room once more. Darius sighed heavily, sinking back against his pillows. You should be cautious, he warned Nathaniel. Ryland has grown accustomed to power during my illness. He will not relinquish it willingly, especially not to an Omega he has spent years demeaning. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. He would challenge me? Not directly, Darius said, his expression grim. But there are other ways to eliminate obstacles. His eyes moved to me, concerned. She will be his first target. The realization that I had become a target sent ice through my veins. All my life I had tried to remain invisible, to avoid drawing attention or causing conflict. Now I stood at the center of a power struggle between packs, with Ryland's hatred focused squarely on me. I should return to my room, I whispered, suddenly desperate to retreat to my small sanctuary. My presence only complicates matters. No. Nathaniel's response was immediate and firm. You're safer where I can see you. Darius nodded in agreement. Ryland will move quickly now. He's waited too long for power to let anything, or anyone, threaten his position. His gaze shifted between us, assessing. The question is what you intend to do, Nathaniel. Finding a Silver Waters Omega after all these years, it cannot be coincidence. Nathaniel's expression remained guarded, but something softened in his eyes when they met mine. The moon goddess guides our paths for reasons we may not immediately understand. I came seeking political alliance. Now. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Now I find myself considering possibilities I had almost abandoned hope of finding. My heart raced at his implication, the pendant warm against my skin. Could it be true? Could the Alpha King, the most powerful wolf in the Northern Territories, truly see something valuable in me, something beyond the defects that had defined my existence for so long? You barely know me, I said softly. I'm not what you think I am. I'm not special. A ghost of a smile touched Nathaniel's lips. You believe that because it's what you've been told. But I suspect you've always felt the difference within yourself. Not weakness, but something else. Something waiting to be awakened. His words struck a chord so deep I nearly gasped. How many nights had I lain awake, wondering why I felt so out of place, so disconnected? How many times had I sensed currents of emotion around me, but been unable to interact with them as other Omegas did? My grandmother's journal, I said suddenly, the pieces beginning to connect. She left writings I never fully understood. If what you say about the Silver Waters clan is true, perhaps there are answers there. Where is this journal? Nathaniel asked, interest sharpening his gaze. Hidden in my room, I replied. Beneath my mattress. Darius shifted on his bed, grimacing with pain as he reached for a small bell on his bedside table. We should retrieve it before Ryland thinks to search your quarters. No need for servants, Nathaniel said, striding to the door. He opened it, revealing one of his warriors standing guard outside. "Kale, escort Elena to her room to collect her belongings. Return directly here. Allow no interference." The warrior, Kale, nodded once, his expression betraying no emotion. "Yes, my king." I hesitated, looking to Darius for confirmation. Our alpha nodded encouragingly. "Go quickly, child. And Elena." His eyes met mine with unexpected warmth. "I've always known you were different. I just never understood how." With those words echoing in my mind, I followed Kale into the corridor. He moved with silent efficiency, positioning himself slightly ahead of me as we navigated the now empty hallways. The sounds of the feast drifted up from below. Music, laughter, the clatter of plates and goblets. "They celebrate while plotting treason," Kale murmured, almost to himself. "You sense it too?" I asked, surprised by his perception. He glanced back at me, eyes narrowing slightly as if reassessing me. "My king saw something in you the moment we arrived. I trust his judgment." A pause. "And I've spent enough time around power-hungry wolves to recognize the signs." We reached my quarters without incident. The room was exactly as I'd left it, small and sparse, containing little more than a narrow bed, a worn dresser, and a simple wooden chair. My few possessions could fit in a single satchel. "Gather what you need," Kale instructed, positioning himself by the door. "We won't be returning." His words sent a flutter of panic through my chest. "We won't?" "The Alpha King doesn't leave what's his behind," he replied matter-of-factly. "His?" The possessive term should have offended me, yet instead it sent a strange thrill down my spine. I pushed the feeling aside, focusing on the task at hand. Kneeling beside my bed, I lifted the thin mattress and retrieved my grandmother's journal, a leather-bound book worn smooth with age, its pages filled with her elegant script. As I collected my meager belongings, a spare dress, my mother's hairbrush, a small wooden wolf my grandmother had carved, the pendant at my throat suddenly flared hot against my skin. At the same moment, Kale stiffened. "Someone's coming," he whispered, hand moving to the blade at his hip. "Quickly now." I stuffed the remaining items into my satchel, clutching the journal tightly against my chest. Footsteps approached, multiple sets, moving with purpose. "No time," Kyle muttered, scanning the small room. His gaze landed on the window. "Can you climb?" Before I could answer, the door burst open. 3 of our pack warriors stood there, led by Ryland's most loyal lieutenant, Varen. "The Beta requires the Omega's presence at the feast," Varen announced, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. His eyes narrowed as he took in my packed belongings. "Going somewhere, little mouse?" Kyle moved with fluid grace, positioning himself between me and the doorway. "The Alpha King has ordered her to remain with him. Your Beta's demands are irrelevant." Varen's lips curved into an unpleasant smile. "Interesting, because our Beta speaks with our Alpha's authority. And our Alpha has just announced at the feast that the rare Omega is to be presented as a gesture of goodwill between our packs." Ice flooded my veins. Darius would never have authorized such a thing. Which meant... "A bold claim," Kale replied, his posture deceptively relaxed while his eyes tracked every movement of the warriors. "Perhaps we should verify this with Alpha Darius directly." "Our Alpha is indisposed at present," Varen said smoothly. "The excitement of the evening has overtaxed him. He rests under the care of our healers." Alarm bells rang in my mind. Darius had been fine, tired but alert, when we left him with Nathaniel. For him to suddenly become indisposed was too convenient. "The girl comes with us," Varen insisted, taking a step into the room. "Now." "The girl," Kyle said coldly, "is under the Alpha King's protection. Touch her, and it's your life you forfeit." The tension in the room thickened, a standoff that could erupt into violence at any moment. My mind raced, searching for a solution that wouldn't end in bloodshed. Then, almost of its own accord, my hand moved to the pendant at my throat. My grandmother's voice seemed to whisper in my memory. "When the waters are troubled, sometimes the wisest course is to dive beneath them." The pendant pulsed once, a flash of warmth that spread through my chest. And suddenly, I understood what I had to do. "I'll go," I said quietly. Kale shot me a sharp look. "The king ordered—" "I know." I met his gaze steadily, willing him to understand, but more lives than mine hang in the balance. Tell your king I will meet him at the feast. Confusion flickered across Kyle's face, quickly replaced by suspicion, but something, perhaps the calm certainty in my voice, made him hesitate. Viren smiled triumphantly. A sensible choice. Come, Omega. The pack awaits. As I moved toward the door, I brushed past Kale, pressing my grandmother's journal into his hands. Give this to him, I whispered. Tell him to read the passage marked with the silver thread. Kale's fingers closed around the book, concealing it within his cloak in one smooth movement. His eyes met mine, a silent promise passing between us. The warriors closed around me as we left my quarters, their formation making it clear I was not merely being escorted, but guarded. As we descended toward the great hall, the sounds of revelry grew louder, forced gaiety layering over undercurrents of tension. What happened to Alpha Darius? I asked Varen, keeping my voice neutral. He glanced at me, contempt evident in his expression. Nothing for a defective Omega to concern herself with, but if you must know, he suffered a setback. These things happen with the gravely ill. The implication chilled me. Had Rylan seized this opportunity to accelerate our Alpha's decline? The thought was too horrifying to contemplate, yet it aligned perfectly with his ambitions. We reached the entrance to the great hall, where Rylan himself waited, a cold smile playing on his lips as he saw me approach. Ah, our little aberration, he said, his voice pitched to carry no further than our small group. So good of you to join us. The Alpha King has been asking after you. What have you done to Darius? I demanded, abandoning pretense. Rylan's smile widened. Done? I've merely attended to our ailing Alpha's needs, as I have these many months. He leaned closer. It's tragic how these lingering illnesses can take sudden turns for the worse. Rage flooded me, a foreign, powerful emotion I had never allowed myself to feel before. For a moment, something shifted inside me, like a door unlocking. The pendant flared against my skin, and Rylan flinched, a fleeting expression of confusion crossing his face. Now, he said, recovering quickly, you will enter the hall, greet our northern guests with appropriate deference, and say nothing of your private conversations with the Alpha King. Nothing that might embarrass our pack or suggest impropriety. His fingers dug painfully into my arm. Do you understand? I looked into his eyes, the eyes of a wolf who had likely poisoned his own Alpha, who had systematically undermined my worth for years, who now threatened everything and everyone I cared about, and for the first time in my life, I didn't look away in submission. Perfectly, I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. His eyes narrowed at my tone, but he merely nodded, releasing my arm and gesturing toward the doorway. After you, then. The great hall had been transformed in our absence. Long tables groaned under the weight of a lavish feast, torches blazed from wall sconces, and musicians played in the corner. Pack members mingled with the northern delegation, a facade of unity and celebration masking the undercurrents of tension. As I entered, heads turned. Conversations paused, and across the room, Nathaniel's eyes found mine immediately, intense and questioning. He stood near the head table, surrounded by his warriors, yet somehow isolated, his powerful frame tense with barely contained emotion. The pendant at my throat pulsed once more, responding to his presence. Without thinking, I took a step toward him, drawn by a pull I couldn't explain. Rylan's hand at my back stopped me. Not so fast, he murmured. First, we must properly present you to our guests. He raised his voice, addressing the room at large. Northern friends, Southern Pack members, tonight we celebrate new beginnings and strengthened alliances. A cheer rose from the crowd, though I noticed many of the Northern wolves merely raised their goblets in perfunctory acknowledgement, their attention fixed on their Alpha King. In the tradition of our ancestors, Rylan continued, we offer a gesture of goodwill between our packs. His hand moved to my shoulder, gripping tightly enough to bruise. Our rare Omega, unique in her abilities, to serve the Northern Pack as a symbol of our commitment to peace. Shocked silence fell over the hall. Even those who had treated me with contempt seemed stunned by Rylan's announcement. To offer an Omega, any Omega, as a gesture, was unprecedented, bordering on barbaric. My eyes locked with Nathaniel's across the room. His expression had turned to stone, but the rage in his gaze was unmistakable. Beside him, Cale had appeared, my grandmother's journal partially visible in his hand. Their eyes met in silent communication, and I knew my message had been delivered. "This is an unusual offer," Nathaniel said, his deep voice carrying effortlessly through the hall. "And one I must decline." Ryland's grip on my shoulder tightened painfully. "Decline? But surely the rare gifts of this Omega would benefit your pack. She may be unconventional, but—" "I decline," Nathaniel interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. "Because one does not accept as a gift what is already rightfully claimed." A collective gasp rippled through the hall. Ryland's fingers dug so deeply into my shoulder that I had to bite my lip to keep from crying out. "Claimed?" Ryland echoed, disbelief and fury warring in his voice. "On what grounds would you claim a member of our pack?" Nathaniel stepped forward, his movement graceful despite his imposing size. The crowd parted before him like water around stone. "On grounds as ancient as our kind," he said, his eyes never leaving mine. "The Silver Waters bloodline has returned to claim its rightful place." Murmurs swept through the hall. Even those who had scorned me looked confused, uncertain. "Silver Waters?" someone whispered. "The lost Northern clan? Impossible," another hissed. "They were wiped out generations ago." Ryland's face contorted with rage. "This is absurd. She's nothing but a defective Omega, barely worthy of pack protection. Whatever game you're playing, Alpha King." "It is no game," Nathaniel cut him off, his voice deadly quiet. "And you would do well to remember your place, Beta. You address not only the Alpha King of the North, but the rightful mate of the woman you've spent years demeaning." The word mate hung in the air, electric with implication. My heart hammered against my ribs as Nathaniel closed the distance between us, stopping mere feet away. The pendant at my throat burned hot, pulsing in time with my racing pulse. "My king," Cale said, stepping forward with my grandmother's journal. "The passage you requested." Nathaniel took the book, opening it to where a silver thread marked a page. His eyes scanned the words, his expression shifting subtly. Surprise, then understanding, then determination hardening his features. "Hear me," he addressed the room, his voice carrying the unmistakable weight of alpha command. "The woman you know as Elena is the granddaughter of Alara of the Silver Waters, last guardian of the Northern sacred bloodlines. Her rareness is not a defect but a gift, one your pack has failed to recognize or respect." He held up the journal. "Written here, in Alara's own hand, is the truth she concealed to protect her granddaughter. The Silver Waters Omegas possess the ability to control their presence, to conceal their power until it is needed. They appear weak to those unworthy of their gifts, but to their true mates," he looked at me, something fierce and tender in his gaze. "To their true mates they are unmistakable." Ryland laughed, the sound bitter and mocking. "A convenient story. But where is the proof? If she possesses such power, why has she never demonstrated it?" "Because it must be awakened," Nathaniel replied evenly, "triggered by necessity or proximity to her mate. And from what I've witnessed, your pack has given her every reason to remain hidden, to suppress what makes her extraordinary." His words resonated deep within me, touching on truths I had sensed but never understood. The odd moments throughout my life when emotions around me had seemed briefly malleable, when I had wished myself invisible and somehow succeeded, when the pendant had warmed against my skin in warning or reassurance. "This is manipulation," Ryland snarled, desperation edging his voice as he addressed the crowd. "An attempt to claim our territory through false pretenses. Will you allow our pack to be subsumed by Northern lies?" Several of our pack members shifted uncomfortably, uncertain where to place their loyalty. The Northern warriors had moved subtly, positioning themselves throughout the room in strategic formation, ready for conflict. "There is one way to settle this matter definitively," Nathaniel said, his eyes finding mine. "Elena, your grandmother's journal speaks of an awakening ritual, a claiming that brings forth the true nature of a Silver Waters Omega." He extended his hand toward me. "Do you consent to this?" The pendant pulsed once more, insistently. Something inside me responded, a recognition beyond conscious thought. a certainty that transcended the fear and doubt that had defined my existence. "I consent," I said, my voice stronger than I had ever heard it. Ryland's grip tightened, preventing me from moving. "This is treason against your pack," he hissed. "No," I replied, meeting his gaze without flinching. The treason was poisoning our alpha to seize power. The treason was offering a pack member as a token gift. The treason was years of cruelty disguised as leadership. His face paled, then flushed dark with fury. "You know nothing." "I know enough," I said, surprising myself with my boldness. "I know Darius would never have sanctioned what you've done tonight. I know the timing of his setback is too convenient. For a fraction of a second, Ryland's control slipped, confirming my accusations in his expression before rage masked it once more. His hand moved to his belt, where a blade gleamed in the torchlight. "You will regret those words," he snarled, drawing the dagger with lightning speed. Several things happened at once. Nathaniel surged forward. Pack members cried out in alarm. Northern warriors reached for weapons, and something within me, a dam long held in check, finally broke free. The pendant flared with blinding intensity, heat flooding through my body in a rush of power I had never known I possessed. Time seemed to slow as instinct took over, guiding me in ways I didn't consciously understand. I reached out, not physically, but with something deeper, an extension of will that touched the emotional currents in the room. And for the first time, I didn't just sense those currents. I bent them. A wave of calm radiated outward from where I stood, touching every wolf in the great hall. Movement slowed. Aggression ebbed. Even Ryland's blade seemed to hesitate in its arc toward me, his expression shifting from rage to confusion as the emotional manipulation washed over him. In that moment of suspended violence, Nathaniel reached us. His hand closed around Ryland's wrist with crushing force, arresting the blade's movement completely. "You dare!" Nathaniel said, his voice a low growl. "Raise a weapon against my mate?" Ryland struggled against the Alpha King's grip, his momentary disorientation giving way to renewed fury. "She is not your mate. She is nothing." "She," Nathaniel replied, twisting until Ryland was forced to drop the dagger. "Just demonstrated the power you claimed she lacked." He glanced around the hall, where wolves stood frozen in various states of confusion and awe. Everyone in this room felt it, the calming influence of a Silverwater's Omega, the gift you dismissed as defect. Ryland's gaze darted around wildly, seeking supporters among our pack members, but the expressions that met his were transformed. Uncertainty, reassessment, and in some cases, dawning shame for how they had treated me. "You've challenged the Alpha King's mate," Kale stated, stepping forward. "By our laws, that alone warrants execution." Nathaniel's expression hardened. "Indeed it does." His grip tightened on Ryland's wrist until the beta gasped in pain. "But death would be too merciful for what you've done. To Elena, to your Alpha, to your entire pack." The pendant at my throat pulsed once more. Guiding me, I placed my hand on Nathaniel's arm, the contact sending a jolt of awareness between us. "There has been enough violence," I said quietly. "Let his punishment be to live with his failure." Stripped of rank and power, Nathaniel looked at me, something like pride flickering in his storm-gray eyes. After a moment's consideration, he nodded. "As my mate wishes, Ryland of the Southern Pack, you are hereby stripped of your beta status and banished from these territories. If you are found within our borders after sunrise, your life is forfeit." Ryland's face contorted with hatred and disbelief. "You can't—" "I can, and I have," Nathaniel cut him off. "But before you go, you will tell us exactly what you've done to Alpha Darius, the composition of the poison, the antidote, if one exists." For a moment, Ryland looked as though he might refuse, then his gaze flickered to the northern warriors surrounding him, to the pack members whose loyalty had visibly shifted, to the naked blade now pointed at his throat. "Fine," he spat. "Nightshade extract. Administered in small doses over months. There is no antidote, but cease the dosing and he might recover with time." Nathaniel nodded to Kale. "Escort our former beta to the borders. Ensure he takes nothing but the clothes on his back." As Ryland was led away, his venomous glare promised this was not the end, but for the first time, I did not shrink from his hatred. Something had fundamentally shifted within me, a certainty, a strength I had always possessed but never accessed. The crowd in the great hall remained silent, processing the dramatic events they had witnessed. I became acutely aware of every gaze upon me, every emotional current swirling through the room, confusion, awe, reassessment, and in some cases lingering doubt. "The claiming ritual," Nathaniel said, his voice pitched for my ears alone. "Are you ready?" I looked up at him, this powerful alpha who had seen what others had missed, who had recognized my worth when everyone else had dismissed it. "What does it entail?" A hint of a smile touched his lips. "Nothing to fear. It merely confirms what we both already know." He nodded toward the pendant. "That will guide us." As if in response, the silver pendant pulsed warmly. Taking a deep breath, I nodded. Nathaniel took my hands in his, the contact sending shivers of awareness up my arms. His touch was gentle despite the power evident in his frame, his storm-gray eyes intent on mine. "By ancient right and the will of the moon goddess," he began, his voice carrying through the hushed hall. "I, Nathaniel, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, claim Elena of the Silver Waters as my mate, my equal, and my queen." The pendant flared with sudden heat, and a gasp escaped me as energy surged between us, visible to all as a soft silver glow that enveloped our joined hands. "Do you accept this claim?" Nathaniel continued, his voice deepening, "freely and without reservation, binding our souls as the goddess intended?" The question hung in the air between us. This was no mere ceremony, no political alliance. This was a choice that would alter the course of my life forever, binding me to a man I barely knew, yet somehow recognized at the deepest level. I thought of my grandmother's words in her journal: "When the rivers of fate converge, do not fight the current. Trust in what you feel beyond what you know." "I accept," I said clearly, the words feeling right in a way nothing else ever had. "I, Elena of the Silver Waters, claim Nathaniel as my mate, my equal, and my king." The silver glow intensified, spreading from our joined hands to envelop us completely. The pendant at my throat seemed to sing, its warmth spreading through my body in waves of power that awakened something dormant within me. Suddenly, I could sense every emotional current in the room with perfect clarity: fear, wonder, jealousy, respect, and knew I could shape them if I chose. The rareness that had been my shame revealed itself as extraordinary sensitivity and control. A gift, rather than a defect. Nathaniel's eyes widened slightly as he felt the change in me. "There she is," he murmured, wonder in his voice. "The queen I've been searching for." As the silver glow faded, leaving us standing before the astonished crowd, a voice called out from the entrance to the great hall. "The ritual is complete." All heads turned to see Alpha Darius, leaning heavily on Mira for support, his face pale, but his eyes clear and alert. "The Silver Waters has returned to us, as the prophecy foretold." He looked at me with new respect and something like affection, the quiet river that would carve a new path for our kinds. Gasps rippled through the hall at Darius's appearance. Though clearly weakened, our Alpha stood taller than he had in months, something of his former strength returning to his bearing. "You should be resting," I said, concern overriding protocol as I moved toward him. Darius shook his head, a faint smile touching his lips. "Some moments in history must be witnessed, regardless of personal cost." His gaze moved between Nathaniel and me, assessing the silver glow that still clung to us like morning mist. "The claiming was successful." "It was," Nathaniel confirmed, his hand finding mine as if drawn by instinct. The contact sent another ripple of awareness through me, my newly awakened senses registering the complex emotions beneath his controlled exterior: satisfaction, protectiveness, and something deeper that made my breath catch. Darius nodded slowly. "Then the alliance between North and South is sealed, not through political maneuvering, but by bonds more ancient and binding." The pack members exchanged uncertain glances, struggling to process how quickly their world had transformed. One moment I had been the defective Omega they scarcely acknowledged. Now I stood claimed by the Alpha King, my rare nature revealed as power rather than weakness. An older wolf stepped forward, Thalia, our pack's historian, whose wisdom had often been overshadowed by Ryland's aggressive leadership. "The prophecy," she said, her voice quavering with age and emotion. "After all these years—" "What prophecy?" someone called out. Thalia looked around the hall, her gaze finally settling on me. "When the Silver Waters clan disappeared a generation ago, it was foretold that one would return, a quiet force, overlooked and underestimated, who would bridge divided territories and bring balance to power unchecked." She gestured to the pendant at my throat. "The sign would be the river's heart, responding only to its true counterpart." Murmurs spread through the crowd as understanding dawned. The pendant, my grandmother's final gift, had recognized Nathaniel from the moment he arrived, had guided me toward this moment, even when my conscious mind couldn't comprehend what was happening. "Is it true?" a young Omega asked, stepping forward hesitantly. "Can you really control emotions? Make us feel things?" I felt Nathaniel's hand tighten protectively around mine, but I squeezed back reassuringly. This was my moment to define myself to those who had dismissed me for so long. "Not make you feel," I corrected gently. "Guide what already exists. Calm what rages, soothe what hurts, balance what tips toward extremes." I looked around at the faces watching me, some wary, some wondering, some regretful. The gift was always there, but like a river that runs underground, invisible until it finds the right channel to flow through. "And the Alpha King?" another voice called. "He awakened this power? He recognized it," I said, meeting Nathaniel's gaze. "When no one else could, or would." Darius cleared his throat, drawing attention back to himself. "The ramifications of tonight's events extend beyond personal transformations. With this claiming, our territories are bound in ways no political treaty could achieve." He turned to Nathaniel. "I assume you'll want to return north with your mate as soon as possible." A shadow crossed Nathaniel's features. "With your permission, we will depart tomorrow. My lands have been without their alpha too long, and Elena will need time to adjust to her new position." His gaze softened as it returned to me. To learn the extent of her gifts, away from those who would doubt her. The reality of what this meant crashed over me in a sudden wave. I would be leaving, abandoning the only home I'd ever known, however unwelcoming it had often been. Traveling north to territories I'd never seen, to rule beside a mate I was only beginning to know. "What of our pack?" someone asked, voicing the question many were thinking. With Ryland banished and our alpha still recovering, Darius straightened, summoning dignity despite his weakness. "I am still alpha of the Southern Pack. My recovery begins tonight with the removal of Ryland's poison." His gaze swept the hall, and with honest reflection on how we allowed ambition and prejudice to corrupt our pack's values. How we failed to protect and value one of our own. Shame rippled through the crowd, many lowering their eyes as the truth of his words sank in. I felt their emotions. Regret, embarrassment, confusion, like currents brushing against my consciousness. "Elena," Darius continued, his tone gentling as he addressed me directly. "The Southern Pack owes you an apology that can never be adequate for years of mistreatment. While your destiny clearly lies elsewhere, know that you will always have a place here, not as the Omega we failed to understand, but as the Queen who rose above our limitations." Tears pricked behind my eyes at this public acknowledgement. For so long, all I had wanted was to belong, to be seen as valuable. Now that validation came just as I prepared to leave. "Thank you," I said simply, knowing no elaborate response was needed. Nathaniel addressed the hall, his voice carrying the natural authority of an alpha king. "The alliance between North and South begins with respect and continues with action. Your borders will be protected as extensions of northern territory. Your resources supplemented from our abundance. Your sick tended by our healers." His gaze fell on Darius. "Beginning tonight." He nodded to Kale, who stepped forward. "Escort our finest healer to Alpha Darius's chambers. The poison must be purged completely." As arrangements were made and the crowd began to disperse, Mira approached me, tears glistening in her eyes. "I always knew you were special," she said, touching my arm gently. "I just never imagined how much." I embraced her, this friend who had shown kindness when others offered only scorn. You saw me when no one else did. That means more than any title or power." She smiled through her tears. "Queen Elena, it suits you, though I'll miss you terribly." "You could come with me," I suggested impulsively. "The Northern Court will need familiar faces to help me transition." Hope brightened her expression. "Do you mean it?" "The Queen's first official request," Nathaniel confirmed, joining our conversation. "Already granted." Mira bowed deeply, genuine respect replacing her earlier friendly informality. "I would be honored, my king, my queen." The titles felt strange, almost absurd when applied to me. Yet as I looked around the great hall, at wolves who had previously ignored my existence now watching me with newfound deference, I realized my transformation went beyond the awakening of dormant abilities. My place in the world had fundamentally shifted. "Come," Nathaniel said softly, his hand at the small of my back. "There is much to discuss before morning, and you need rest." He led me from the hall, through corridors where servants bowed as we passed, up to a grand suite prepared for the visiting Alpha King. Guards positioned themselves outside our door, their presence a reminder of my new reality. Not just claimed, but precious, protected, valued. Inside the luxurious chambers, away from watchful eyes, Nathaniel's formal demeanor softened. He moved to the fireplace, adding logs to build the flames higher against the night's chill. "You have questions," he said, not turning around. "Ask them." I sank onto a velvet-covered settee, suddenly overwhelmed by the night's events. "How did you know what I was?" "Truly?" He straightened, firelight casting his powerful silhouette in sharp relief. "Legends of the Silver Waters Omegas have been passed down through generations of Northern Alphas. The perfect counterbalance to dominant wolves, rare enough that finding one was considered almost mythical." He turned to face me. 3 years ago, a dream came to me. A river running silver beneath moonlight, calling me to search. I visited every pack in the realm since then, looking for what I couldn't quite define until I felt its absence in that courtyard tonight. "The void," I murmured, recalling his earlier words. "Yes." He moved closer, sitting beside me with careful respect for my space. When everyone else projects their emotions outward, the absence of projection becomes noticeable, like a still pool among rushing currents. His eyes studied my face with quiet intensity, but it wasn't until I saw your pendant that certainty came. I touched the silver river symbol, now cool and quiet against my skin. My grandmother never told me what it meant, only that it would protect me when she couldn't. "And it did," he confirmed. "It kept your nature hidden until the right moment, until you were ready. Until I found you." The fire crackled in the silence that followed, casting dancing shadows across the room. Outside, the sounds of the pack house settling for the night filtered through the windows. Footsteps, distant conversations, the occasional bark of laughter. "What happens now?" I finally asked, voicing the question that weighed most heavily. "I know nothing about being a queen, about the North, about—" I hesitated, heat rising to my cheeks. "About being a mate." Something changed in his expression. A softening, a vulnerability that made him suddenly seem less like the fearsome Alpha King and more like a man approaching something precious. "We learn together," he said simply. "The claiming has bound us, but the knowing comes with time." He reached out slowly, giving me space to retreat if I wished, and tucked a strand of light hair behind my ear. I would not rush what should unfold naturally. His consideration, his willingness to wait despite the claiming that entitled him to more, touched something deep within me. For the first time, I consciously extended my newfound senses, reaching out to feel the emotions beneath his controlled exterior. What I found nearly stole my breath. Longing, yes, but also patience, determination tempered with gentleness. And beneath it all, a loneliness that mirrored my own. A soul that had searched too long for its counterpart. "I felt that," he said quietly, wonder in his voice. "You're learning already." I nodded, surprised by how natural it felt to reach out with these new senses, to touch the emotional currents around me. "It's like discovering a limb I never knew I had." "Your grandmother's journal contains exercises to strengthen your abilities," he told me. The Silver Waters Omegas were renowned for their skill in emotional manipulation, not just calming but inspiring courage before battles, facilitating negotiations between hostile parties, even healing trauma that ran too deep for words. The possibilities unfolded before me. Not just power, but purpose. Not just value to a mate, but to communities torn by conflict. To a world where alpha strength had too often gone unchecked by balancing forces. Why did they disappear? I asked. The Silver Waters clan. Nathaniel's expression darkened. Fear, jealousy, the eternal weakness of those who don't understand power different from their own. He sighed. A coalition of packs, led by an alpha who believed such omegas undermined traditional strength, attacked their territory. Few survived. Those who did scattered, hiding their nature to protect their bloodline. Like my grandmother, I whispered, pieces of my history finally connecting. She came south to hide in plain sight, knowing no one here would recognize what we were, he nodded. And in doing so, preserved the most precious gift our kind has known, the ability to balance power with compassion, strength with wisdom. His hand found mine, our fingers intertwining naturally. What was meant to be extinguished will now return to its rightful place. Through you, the weight of this legacy settled on my shoulders, not as a burden, but as a mantle I was born to wear. For the first time in my life, my difference made sense not as a flaw, but as a calling. I'm ready, I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. To learn. To become what I was meant to be. The smile that transformed Nathaniel's face was like sunrise breaking through clouds, warmth and light where severity had been. We leave for the north at dawn. A new era begins with our return. As night deepened around us, we talked of many things. The territories I would soon call home, the customs I would need to learn, the challenges we would face together. Gradually, the strangeness of our situation gave way to a comfortable familiarity, as if our souls recognized each other even as our minds were still becoming acquainted. When exhaustion finally claimed me, Nathaniel insisted I take the bed while he remained by the fire. Even in this, he defied the expectations of an alpha claiming his mate, patient, considerate, willing to wait for trust to build between us. As I drifted toward sleep, the pendant at my throat pulsed once more. Not in warning this time, but in confirmation. The quiet river had found its course at last. No longer hidden underground, but flowing strong and true toward a future I was only beginning to imagine. Dawn broke clear and bright, sunlight streaming through windows I'd left uncurtained. For a moment, disorientation gripped me as I took in unfamiliar surroundings. The luxurious bed, the elegant furnishings, the embers of last night's fire still glowing in the hearth. Then memory returned in a rush. The claiming, the revelation, the transformation that had turned the defective Omega into a queen overnight. Nathaniel stood by the window, his powerful silhouette outlined against the morning light. He turned as I stirred, his expression softening as our eyes met. "The northern delegation is prepared to depart," he said. "Are you ready to begin your journey, Silver Queen?" I rose from the bed, smoothing my simple dress, the last reminder of a life already fading into memory. Soon, I would wear the finery befitting my new station, would learn to carry myself with the dignity expected of the Alpha King's mate. But in this moment of transition, I was grateful for the familiar, for one last connection to who I had been. "Almost," I replied, moving to retrieve my grandmother's journal and pendant, the two items that had guided me to this moment, that connected my past to my future. Now I'm ready. As we emerged from our chambers, pack members lined the corridors, bowing as we passed. Not with the fearful deference they showed Rylan, but with genuine respect, and in some cases, with shame-faced regret for years of mistreatment. In the courtyard, the northern warriors had assembled, horses saddled, and provisions packed for the journey home. Mira waited with a small bundle of her own, her expression a mix of excitement and nervous anticipation. Darius stood at the gates, leaning heavily on a staff, but standing under his own power. The night's healing had begun to reverse the damage of Rylan's slow poisoning, bringing color back to his cheeks and clarity to his eyes. "The pack will always remember this day," he said as we approached, when the quiet one revealed her true strength, when the overlooked became the essential. He bowed his head respectfully. "Safe journey, my queen. May your reign bring the balance our kinds have long needed." I reached out impulsively, taking his hand in mine. With my newly awakened senses, I extended calm and healing toward him, channeling strength into his weakened body. His eyes widened in surprise as the silver glow of my touch briefly enveloped him. "Thank you," he murmured, standing straighter as the pain visibly eased from his features. "A parting gift beyond value." "A reminder," I corrected gently, "that distance does not sever alliances forged in truth." Nathaniel helped me mount a white mare prepared for my journey, the first of many new experiences awaiting me. As our procession moved through the gates, I looked back one last time at the pack house where I had spent my life in shadows, hidden from view, my worth unrecognized. The morning sun glinted off my pendant, casting silver reflections across the courtyard. No longer a symbol of protection through concealment, but of power through revelation. No longer a reminder of what was lost, but a beacon toward what could be built. "They will write songs of this day," Nathaniel said, riding beside me as we crested the hill that would soon hide the southern territory from view. "When the silver waters returned, when the rare Omega claimed her throne." I smiled, feeling the pendant pulse gently against my skin, no longer in warning or urgency, but in harmony with my awakened nature. "Not songs of what was rare," I corrected, "but of what was always meant to be." As we turned north, toward territories unknown and possibilities unbounded, I felt the final pieces of my old self falling away. The shame, the doubt, the desperate longing to belong. In their place rose certainty, purpose, and the profound understanding that sometimes being overlooked is not a curse, but preparation. The quiet river gathering strength before carving its eternal path through stone.